Tom Cornell, Richard McSorley, Michael True, Jane Morrissey, Timothy Harrington, Juanita Nelson, Sarah Purtle, Billy Neal Moore, Daniel Berrigan, Miriam Therese McGillis, Vincent Harding, Tony Mullaney, Bruce Davidson, Charlie Spencer, Sisters of the Earth, Elle McClellan, Brenna Mae Gagnon, Jeanette Normandin, Thomas Gumbleton, Shelley Douglas, Jim Douglas, Dave Dellinger, Francis Crowe, Sheila Weinberg, Charles McCarthy, Randy Kelleher, Philip Jacobs, Arun Gandhi, Margaret Bullitt Jonas, Shamshad Sikh, Raymond Helmick, Bon Al-Mahfoud, Kathy Breen, Amanda Delosio, Paula Green, Martha Hennessy, Doris and Dave Koziol, Robin Murray, Mariam Shansah, Miyoka Taguchi, Carolyn West, Roy Bourgeois, Roger Geetlip, Bernadette Bostwick, Ami, Tommy Cornell, Shay Reister, Ben Thompson, John Grimm, Mary Evelyn Tucker, Patrick Cage, Ann Rader, Chris Ducat, Edgar Hayes, Jackie Allen, Michael Baxter, Michael Boover, Ahmad Al-Hadidi, Mohammed Bajwa, Hisham Moharam, Nadia Alawa, Robert Emmett Meager, Tahira Amatul Wadud, Patrice Manasseh Kewa Jackson, Doug Fisher, Chief Arvo Looking Horse, Chief Dwayne Perry, Gentle Hawk, Strong Oak Lefebvre, Two Clouds, Alex Muradian, Brenna Cousins Anglada, John H. Bracey Jr., Maritza Cruz, Nicole Braithwaite Hunt, Warren Savage. This is our history of Francis Day. These are the speakers over the past 29 years of Francis Day. It's a remarkable history. And we think back to 1989. I'm wondering how many of you were here in 1989 for the first Francis Day? Anyone? A good handful? How about people who have been coming for 20 years maybe to Francis Day? And people, maybe 10 years they've been coming to Francis Day. And anyone here for the first time?
Yes.
So welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming. So you get a sense of the remarkable speakers we've had over these 30 years. It really tells the story of Francis Day here. We've had all these inspirational speakers, you would think maybe one of them would come to do this introduction, but none of them could make it, so you're stuck with me. So, a little side story. I went to a large Midwestern high school where they handed out A's like bunches of grapes. And I finagled my way to all A's except for 2 classes. One was in auto safety. The other was in public speaking. So, what do you take from this? Don't ask me for a ride home today, and don't ask me to speak at the 30th anniversary. But when I look back on the day, what's been the thread throughout this day? The things that have happened year after year. And we've gathered on this first Saturday in October now this is our 30th year to do that, and today is just a glorious day. We've had all kinds of weather, from cold rain, many of you have been here. So we're grateful, as people have been saying, for the beauty of this day. And the common themes that I saw, 3 stood out for me. One was the inspiration that we come here for, inspiration and thought that we've heard over the many years, all these speakers, and the inspiration from the deeds that people have carried out, the way that they've lived. The life of people like Frida, the other people that you've heard the names of, how they lived their lives. People have come from many backgrounds. If you recognize many of those names, they're from many, many backgrounds. But a commonality of people saying no to war, to racism, to sexism, people calling us to reach out to those on death row, those from other faith traditions, people who have committed their life to the care of the planet, and people who have helped us to see the vital connections that we have to this planet. And people have been reminding us to go to the core, the radical core of our faiths. And we've seen that in many forms. We've heard from Buddhists, from Quakers, from Muslims, from Christians, Jews, natives, from people who don't claim a tradition. But they've all shared this passion to go to the core, to actually see that we're all one people, loved by a loving Creator. Second thing that has been a thread through this Francis Day is the prayer that bonds us. These times of quiet that we've had as a part of these days have been prayerful rituals that we had in the beginning of the day, that we'll have again at the end of the day. It's a reminder in prayer that we're brought together to listen to the one who has made us one. And some of the most memorable Francis Day moments have been around these rituals, have been around this fire, or the procession down to the water that we had, or the gathering around the large oak tree in the center. These are things that actually bring us together on this day and remind us of our purpose. The third thing has been community. Francis Day is a time when each of us says, I'm connected to this community. You may be a part of the community on the work days that happen here at Agape, or you may help with the garden across the way. You may be a part of the public witnesses that happen. Or perhaps you've been an intern here over the years. Or maybe you've even served on the Mission Council and been a big part of this day. But Francis Day is a day when the full community gathers. We're all here together. And even though Agape has found its roots in the Catholic Christian tradition, this has always been a place where we welcome all seekers, including those who don't know yet that they're seekers. It's open to all who want to be a part of what happens here, or who are inquisitive about what happens here. As time has unfolded, the relationships with those from other traditions has become more and more important over the years, in my opinion. And it's people from these other traditions that have helped us to be more faithful to our own tradition, who have called us to build bridges that unite and not ways of separation and division. So it's inspiration, it's prayer, and it's community. That's what this Francis Day has been about. So our 30th year this year, it's quite remarkable. And in some ways, it seems a pretty simple formula for the day, but it takes a ton of work to make this day happen. And today's keynote speakers have been overwhelmingly responsible for this happening over the past years, for the past 29 years. And this year, we are trying something different. The Mission Council is a big part of putting this together, has taken a larger role in making today happen. You're going to see that throughout the day. So if you love what happens today, tell other people, tell the Mission Council, encourage them to continue what they're doing. And if you don't love it, keep it to yourself. So, what can I say? Our next speakers, I would dare to say, have had a formative impact on almost all of us who have gathered here today. And if you're here for the first time and you take in this day, you take in our keynote speakers, you're likely to be like the rest of us, as the JVC folks like to say, you'll be ruined for life. I know for me, it's had an overwhelming impact on my life. I don't know if you've ever looked back on your own life and thought about how one decision set you on a different trajectory in your life. And when I look back on my life, I think back about 35 years ago when I took a class at the Paulus Center in Boston. And it was a class on Christian nonviolence. And it started me down a path of living more intentionally as a Christian than I had at that time. The class was taught by a young man, probably in his 30s, I think, named Brayton. And I soon met Suzanne and became involved with the Agape community. Believe it or not, I still have the book here that we used in that class. And for me, I was learning about people for the first time, people like Dom Helder Camara, Dorothy Day, who I'd never heard about before, Cesar Chavez, and folks like Dan Berrigan, who I'd heard of, but hadn't read much of. But that day and that occasion began to be a time that changed the direction of my life. And much about Agape was quite new to me, yet so much of it felt right. Compassion for the marginalized, trying to be a peacemaker, seeing that prayer was an integral part of living that life, and simple living, and the desire to share all of this with others in community. In those early days, we talked a lot about this alternative lifestyle, stepping away from the mainstream, not getting caught up in power, and relentlessly chasing the buck. That was all around us. Agape was a barely noticeable entity, kind of calling from the margins. And this alternative was rooted in the message of Jesus, exploring what it means to try to live the Sermon on the Mount in these times. We often hear of prophets, and today we need the message of prophets. I think today of Greta Thunberg as one in our time. But just as much, we also need people with the courage to live a prophetic lifestyle, one that's rooted in their deepest convictions. Suzanne and Brayton's message to us have been many, but maybe none as great as they have intentionally chosen to live their lives in authenticity, building community, reaching out to the marginalized, witnessing against violence in its many forms, and trying to live in harmony with creation. At one time, this was thought to be an alternative way of life, embraced only by a few, and those people were usually on the margins. We've reached a time in existence where this way of living must become the common way, or there won't be any existence as we know of it. The times are calling all of us to live a prophetic lifestyle. We're told by the experts that to choose otherwise will lead to the ruin of the planet and just about all species, otherwise referred to as the sixth extinction. It's going to take a lot of courage and commitment beyond what we've mustered thus far, all of us, to stay the course. And we'll need a spirituality of inspiration, of prayer, and community. We'll need to go deeper in the well than we have before. But let's commit today to that deepening and take inspiration from our next speakers who will talk about their journey of living and loving life on the margins. For the first time at the Agape Francis Day, our keynote speakers are Suzanne Brayton and Brayton Shanley.
Well, thank you all. It's a very emotional day.
Hello? Hello, this works, right? Hello?
Yeah, we got it. And on many levels, I think, because we are at the phase in our Agape life as the co-founders with our present co-founders of Steve and Nancy James. I'd like to shout them out wherever they are. There's Nancy and Steve James. 35 years, there's Steve, our co-founders. 35 years missionaries in Haiti are with us today. And I don't think that Charlie McCarthy was able to make it, but a lot of wonderful friends, and especially to see Liz and Frida here. Liz was the homilist at our wedding because we had asked both Phil and Dan to not only marry us, but to be present at the wedding, but they were where? You guessed it. And Liz flew in with Frida and Jerry, and it was an amazing experience. So Bob Wegener, who just introduced us, we have a phrase here at Agape, without Bob, no Agape. Because Bob and his wife, Tara, purchased from us after we moved to Brockton to be with Charlie McCarthy, our other co-founder, purchased a rehabbed house that was actually condemned, and Brayton and I uncondemned it and rehabbed it a little bit, and it was Bob and Tara's purchase of that house that began the Agape story. And we were able to live in Brockton. So Bob Wegener designed every single building in this beautiful land. He designed that house. He designed the straw bale house. He designed the beautiful Hermitage, which I hope some of you will go to see. And this history is recorded in our book, Loving Life on the Margins. And in some ways, this is a quoting Berrigan Day, but Dan Berrigan, the great poet, and I used to exchange letters about our poetry as Phil exchanged letters with Brayton and me from jail and other places, from Jonah House. And Dan wrote in one letter, I think, a good introduction to the book and to the day. Thank you all for all the years. Thank you all for all the years. Sometimes the uphill tends to the awful perpendicular, and we turn into mountain goats or rope hangers. But we dangle and we sweat and we fuss, and we even make it to the next ledge. Given the world, says Dan, can I wish you, us, the next ledge? That's a good title for our next book, if we live that long. Wishing us all the next ledge. Once described as the celebrated trinity of the Roman Catholic left, Dan, Phil, and Liz, the writer who said that didn't realize that Dan thought of himself as a mountain goat hanging on a ledge. So in that frame, we learned in the early stages of our community life together, beginning in 1978 when we met Liz and Phil at the Roe Camp Conference Center. They were late, we were late. Doug Wilson, who runs the center, said, "Do you mind having dinner with Liz and Phil in this tiny little room at the conference center?" And that began our movement towards resistance and establishing community of resistance. We came into the years of community building out of that sense that we were called to a life of resistance to the current and the present, ever-present reality of the violence of this empire. And because of that call, one of the things that became essential for us was to build community. And that began in our digs in Brockton, but it also began with a community called Atlantis, a nonviolent witness for peace. Some of those Atlantis members are here. Those of you who were in that early Atlantis crew, could you stand or raise your hands? Anybody? Dinah Starr? And who's that back there?
Bob Thiefel.
Bob Thiefel. And it was and Claire and Kato Shoni, part of the early community. In the book, you will see pictures of all of us, Claire and Kato. Occasionally, Phil, when he came to town, would stay with us and come to Draper Witness. Dean Hammer. Dean is one of the original Plowshares community. Dean and his wife, Jean, I saw here. Where are you, Dean? There's Dean, also part of that early witness at Draper Lab. So as we moved along in this sense of our rootedness in the gospel, and we thought about new ways of being Catholic. David O'Brien, who's here today, who wrote the introduction to our book, called us, in some ways, the church moving closer and closer to the center. And maybe eventually, as Bob just said, a community like Agape will be more center, and those who choose to live still in the clutches of empire will become the peripheral or the margins. So Agape grew out of Atlantis, and in that time, we had many wonderful experiences with Philip Berrigan and Liz McAllister, trips to Jonah House, witnessing at the Pentagon, rides with Tom Lewis, who is our great friend, artist. And I wish, Nancy, if you would hold up that this banner here. I don't know if Liz has ever seen this, but Tom Lewis gave us this banner. Tom was a member of Catonsville 9. It's upside down. Tom was a member of Catonsville 9 and stayed and lived here, frequently spent time with us, and he did this woodcut and gave it as a gift to Agape, Swords into Plowshares. So we are now in this phase of, in the book, we talk about our marriage being illicit, and the illicitness of the marriage was that we did not get a marriage license because we didn't believe that the state should condone our relationship. So this illicit marriage was the homily given by Liz, in which she said, despite the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the comings and goings of community, people can still make it together. And so we have tried to make it together through various phases of our lives, Brayton, me, and all of the people here who have supported us, and people who aren't here who have supported the community. And in that respect, we took many opportunities to witness against the violence of the war machine. Pax Christi, joined us in many occasions, the House of Peace, John Schuchart and Carrie Schuchart. And one memorable witness was just when we were considering the bombing of Afghanistan. It was the Feast of the Holy Family, and we took our banners, our homemade banners, one that John Schuchart had made, and the question was, who would bomb the sacred families of Afghanistan? And so this consciousness of public witness led us to the cathedral in Boston, and also took us to many other occasions of witness in solidarity with the communities that are here today, Just Faith, Pax Christi, and the Peace Pagoda, and on. So this was the moment in which we were growing and we were rooting ourselves in gospel nonviolence, in witness, and resistance. And Brayton will explain another aspect of our lives which are captured in the book.
So this is a reunion of sorts, the 30th anniversary of Francis Day. We've asked a lot of old friends back and old interns, people who have lived at Agape for some period of time in their life. And so it is a warm-hearted day for us and for the community. Often people most often asked question when people come to Agape who have never been here before was, how did this happen? How did it happen? How did you decide to do this? And the why is sort of wrapped up in the, how did this happen? And I think it happened at turning points, but a major turning point. I think we all can say that of our lives, that there have been turning points. You meet certain people, and your life turns. And certainly that was true of us. And it started in the 1970s when we saw, became very clear about how violent this country was. Growing up thinking it was a great country, a comfortable country, a safe from takeover of any foreign land. And then you know, the fall from innocence. You realize that, well, we are the most violent nation on earth. That's what we are. And we dropped two bombs on Japan in 1945. Hundreds of thousands of people die, and hundreds of thousands of people are terribly injured and die a slow death. So something has to be done about that. So we came to the conclusion that we have to quit our jobs. I had my own educational consulting business, and Suzanne was on her way to a PhD and a life as an English teacher. And we quit our jobs, and we went back to the various Atlantic Life community and Charlie McCarthy and folks like that, and Phil and Dan, of course, and Liz, and say, well, we quit our jobs. And they said, wonderful. Wonderful. The turning point. It was like the tribe encouraging us in. It's fine. It's fine. Now you can be, as Phil said, full-time peacemaker. Full-time peacemaker. Because that's what it takes. That's what it takes. That's what our insight was. That we need to live this full-time. We need to live the gospel of nonviolent love as Jesus spoke. And he called us back. Suzanne and I called us to marriage. He called us to community. And Jesus called us to a life lived of nonviolent community. Juanita Nelson, who is one of the great examples of nonviolence in our time, the tax refuser, Juanita said, it's not so much the leaflet or the protest I go to, that's nonviolence, but nonviolent love is how you live your life every day. How you live your life every day. And that's what we were called to. So we began with that. We then came to this sense of place and a sense of faith. Living your faith. I was at a house of prayer in late 70s, and I was on a retreat next to Eastern Point Retreat House, and I was into teaching yoga and meditation, and I've been changed by the Hindu mystics and Gandhi. I was special devotion to Gandhi. 150 years we celebrated Mahatma Gandhi, October 2nd, 2 days ago. One of the greats, one of the great souls, Mahatma Gandhi, whose example is in the bones and marrow of our whole movement, and the whole movement across the world. And it's been a tremendous inspiration and living witness to me in my life. And I said to the nun, I gave a yoga class after morning prayer, and she gathered around. There were 6 nuns from the CSJs in Boston, and I was telling her my vision, or our vision of community here. And one of the nuns was Irish. She says, it's a lay monasticism. That's what you are. You're a lay monastic. That's good. That's a good thing. Lay monasticism. And so I took it to mean that lay is ordinary. Lay is ordinary. And that's good. I felt fine with that. Ordinary, not professional religionists, no special rank. And monastic also meant unambiguous about faith. You don't walk into monasteries and meet people who are trying to figure out what their faith means to them, or how seriously they should take their faith. They live their life, they live their faith every day. The second thing they represent is that they pray on a schedule, that you have to ground your actions in prayer, and that's on a schedule. You don't try to work in prayer, you pray on a schedule. So I said, that's the vision. That's the vision, yes. Then we ran into Carmelite monks, hermits in Nova Scotia, and they said, well, we are sort of in the monastic tradition, but it's really contemplative. The word is really contemplative. That's what grounds us all. That's the word that reaches all of us and calls all of us. And contemplation was when the Roman augurs looked at the sky in days of yore, they could predict the future by looking at the stars. They were seers. They had special powers to see what the future was to bring. And that was the templum, it was called. And the contemplative brings that templum within. So we look within to know what the truth is. We look within for what Rumi says. When you look within, you know who you are and what you need to do. And that was our call to a life of contemplation. I picked up the book by Thomas Merton, Contemplation in a World of Action. That was it. That was the gospel. That was the call to this life, was contemplation in a world of action. We would have put, instead of just action, it would be nonviolent action. Contemplation is in a world of nonviolent living, and a witness to nonviolent living. So contemplation is the grounding, and nonviolence is the expression, is the love expression of the contemplative life. That was...
Yeah, that was a big part.
Hello.
Is it still working?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay. I must have said something wrong. The divine sound. It was perfectly said. Time to get the hook. I want to say something about place, that spiritual seekers, people who yearn for an alternative way of life, people who learn to know the love of the divine, seek place. We often get inspired by place, and so we did that. We began our community in Brockton in a condemned house that we bought for $23,000, and we put $20,000, our life savings, down. Suzanne cashed in her retirement, and we paid for some of the house through her retirement. So we retired from the old life into the new life. And we started Place with the McCarthy family. The James went to Haiti to be missionaries, 40 years of missionary work. And then we moved to Hardwick to establish place so that we could invite people to a place of nonviolence, learning nonviolence. We could have a place where we could welcome anyone. We could build a house that housed homeless people. Or if people came and they were in desperate straits, they could stay here. We built a place to pray on a schedule. We open the day at 7:30 with prayer. We have a noonday prayer, meditation, and in the evening we have an evening meditation. So that's what we invite people to here. The house was built on an interest-free loan from my aunt Rhoda, who was my mother's sister-in-law, and she was the only real Catholic in the family. Big Catholic family, but she was the only one that was the real thing, and she loved what we were doing, and so she loaned us $25,000 to buy the land. The land was we found was less than $1,000 an acre, and so we were off and running. We had 3 carpenters, 3 builders. One was Daniel Lawrence. He was a former Trappist monk and a peacemaker and a carpenter. So we asked him if he wanted to help build a house, but he couldn't really answer the letter directly because he was, as Dan Berrigan, well, according to Berrigans and Liz tonight, but today, as Dan said, that Dan Lawrence was enjoying a all expenses paid state scholarship for peacemakers at the Worcester County Jail, and that he could not begin the building process until he was out. Then there was Wayne Petron, who was the electrician, and he also was on a fully supported, all expenses paid state scholarship at Worcester County Jail, all for nuclear weapons protest. Alden Poole was the other carpenter, and he had just been out of the Bill Recca House of Correction, fully covered by the state of Massachusetts. So you can see the kind of spirit we have in the House of Francis. So we took the name Francis for the house. After we built, it took us 8 months to make it livable, 2 years to make it complete enough to move in and say it was a house. We took the name Francis for 2 reasons. He's a combat veteran who was traumatized by war, and he found Jesus, found the nonviolent Jesus, committed his life to the nonviolent Jesus, and witnessed to that. He tried to broker a deal with Malak al-Kamil in the Fifth Crusade, who was the Sultan on the Muslim side, risked his life to do so. And so he is a symbol of and a living witness to the uncompromising nature of nonviolence as it comes from the teachings and example of Jesus. He is such an uncompromising Christian that he has been called by Adolf Hull, the German writer, as the last Christian. He's also the patron saint of ecology. So we were now entering the ecozoic age, as Thomas Berry said. There's 3 histories in human consciousness. First is God to human mediation, when we realize we're not alone, we have God. And there's human to human mediation, where humans get to know each other, they get to reconcile with each other, they procreate and they love within the human community, or they reconcile the violence that they need to change in the human community. And Thomas Berry says now, this time in history, is the ecozoic age. This is where we have to have human to earth mediation. And this, we don't ever forget God to human mediation. We never forget the human to human mediation. As Pope Francis says, integral ecology includes that. But now we must turn and reconcile with the earth and find our true place in the earth. So that is the next stage of agape. So 13 years into the Agape experience here in Francis' house, Teresa came up to her mother and said, "Mom, I'm done with community." Everything was done under one roof, not good for a 13-year-old girl. So she said, "No, I think we're done with that. We need a new house. We need another house." So, where's my? This is from our memoir. We were 13 years into community living where all interns and guests lived under one roof on 2 floors. We had very little to go on about how families actually live in community with non-family members. Our daughter was making her 13-year-old non-negotiable demand for more privacy. Her ultimatum encouraged us to acknowledge how fair and sensible it was for the 3 of us to have our own separate living space. Family autonomy is essential in community with others. If we long for too much privacy, we fall back into isolation and living sequestered as nuclear families. We decided to yield to Teresa's assertion that we should build a residence for our family. But what to build? How to build it? We recognized that such a new residence had to be a sign of the environmental times we were entering. The year was 1997, the end of the second millennium, and we humans were waking up to a revelation of our grievously mistaken ways of living life on Earth. So we needed to build green. We needed to stop burning fossil fuels. It was a very simple equation. The IPCC report came out with 90 climate scientists, 60 countries represented, 6,000 studies saying that we have 10 years left we have a 10-year window to reduce our greenhouse gases by 40%, starting in 2020. So that is the ecozoic age that we have to respond to. So we began with 2 things in mind. One is that you have to live without fossil fuels. You have to live a lifestyle that's simple machines without fossil fuels. So we built a straw bale house with a compost toilet and solar energy. Straw bale house is 50 R50. It holds in twice the heat, let's say the insulation value of a Francis house, which is R25. Straw is also a yearly renewable resource, so we have to stop cutting wood for heat, cutting wood for building. We have to stop clear cutting wood for building. And even Rosebud and a lot of the native Lakota Nation is learning how to build with straw bale because they can pass that on to generation at a very little cost as compared to commercial building. The solar energy is one way that we can enter into the renewables. We need to stop burning fossil fuels and convert to solar, wind, and other forms of renewables that are going to come up as we invest in that. If we invest now in that, then we will, by 2050, if we invest in solar and wind, 67% of our energy can come from renewable energies. We are on a timeline. We all know the extinctions. Half the wild animals are gone since 1970. That there are 1 million species at risk at this point. Every insect under study is in decline. So this is the ecozoic age that has no historic precedent. So we should end with.
there's so much in the writing of this book. It took us 3 or 4 years. We felt that we were called to be scribes and keepers of the flame of resistance, that we were involved in a duty to remember and record what we realize will not be replicated, at least not in the form it was recorded and as it exists today. The guiding force behind the Agape community for 25 years or more has been Agape's Mission Council. And I would love it if people who are in the Mission Council now would stand or raise their hands. Please stand. And the important aspect of the Mission Council is that this is the future of Agape if it is to continue beyond the lifetime of Brayton and Suzanne. And so as we look forward, we are very much aware of legacy. The Tao Te Ching tells us that a wise person yields and doesn't overwhelm, sows and doesn't worry about reaping. We learn from the Tao that sowers end up going to where harm may happen and risky endeavors flow from people who yield and are not content with home. So we gravitated towards sowing seeds of discontent, staking our future on the kind of friendships that derive from community bonds broadly shared. Home came to mean life sharing with companions on the way who comprise a committed core, such as the young people who are now the successors, in a manner of speaking, of Agape. So among those, we have Allison Roberts, we have James Robinson, we have Ann Rader and Edgar Hayes, we have Kate Carew, we have Teresa Wheeler, we have Dave Perkins, and we have our committed core of elders, Brayton and myself, Sister Eleanor McClellan, Skip Shield, Bob Wegener. And with this force field, as we went into our 25th anniversary in 1997, we took heart from the words of the poet Denise Levertov in her poem People Power at the Die-In. Levertov seems to capture the essence of the Agape community. We are a small, ephemeral harvest of our own stirring. Small, stirring. The years break open into a promise. Yes, Agape, yes. Agape's promise arises from your imagining and our imagining, the dreaming of joining together to create something so seemingly beyond our own capabilities. In our modest attempt to paint a canvas of yes, we focused on some of what has been made visible to us and much of what remains invisible now as we yield to the future and the young people who will take up the work of Agape. Thank you all very much.
We had committed ourselves to shouting out to thanks of people, and I did in our building episodes. I wanted to give a special thanks to Bob Thiefels, who's here today, old friend. Thank you, Bob, for all the good work, and had a lot to do with building Francis House, and he spent a lot of years coming from Vermont to help us run programs for the college students. And thanks also to Paul Mandlewski, right? And Robbie and the Mandlewski family, right? Dave. Yeah. And so, Melissa, back up there. Mark Corbin's here, and he's an old peacenik, and he helped a great deal with the straw bale house. So it's all, it's all a family here, and we feel the love and support of so many people. Matt Riddle was a former Trappist monk. He was leaving the Trappist monastery to come to Agape, thinking that the new contemplative or the new monasticism was in this kind of dynamic as opposed to the traditional Trappist. And he said to me, don't look for the next generation. Don't look for young people who are on their devices all day. Look for the young people on the margins. In the next years, we must begin to turn our sights from the intentional community margins of Agape to the creative borders of a new and evolving consciousness. Petitioning for God's assistance, we have questions that loom. Will we attract readiness in the next generations, or those eager for radical simplicity that divests from slavish reliance on fossil fuels and machines that require them? In such subcultures, perhaps, we will find young people ready to evolve beyond war and the myriad justifications for violence. Signs we see are not conclusive, but suggest that the next Agape community, the next ALC and Catholic worker communities, what's going to happen to all of these, huh? They will be inhabited by those who seek mystical union with the divine in ordinary everyday life experience. They may not be found in church, but in creative evolutions of church. A renaissance in new religious forms. As we move into the next 20 years of a world rebirthed into a more interfaith and integrated ways, we will be absorbed into the second axial age. The first axial age was Buddha and Lao Tzu and the Greek philosophers and the prophets. Communities like Agape that have always practiced rudimentary interspirituality will find ourselves ready to offer our vision of what might come next. And yet, if we don't read spiritual evolution accurately and merge into it, I wonder if our Agape community will die out with the other religions in a 21st century postmodern purge. As a Christian, I continue to believe in grounding myself in one faith. The truth for me remains that Jesus Christ, even beyond the bounds of institutional Christianity, expresses the center and the unity of the cosmic universe as no other being can. I trust the more enlightened age to come will maintain the spiritual design of the love, compassion, and mercy that Jesus lives and teaches. The unitive force of interspirituality that I can imagine drawing together adherents of the world's many faith traditions can be held together only in nonviolent love. As Gandhi said, we progress toward nonviolence or we rush to doom. Such integration will be not only for the benefit of all humans and our planet Earth, but for a loving embrace of the entire cosmos.
Amen.
So, thank you all for listening. Should we have a question, or does anybody want to say anything besides us?
Amen.
Amen. All right, good. Amen has the last word. So we will hand it back over to Edgar, and we will talk about the break that's about to come. Thank you all for being here.